Hello, everybody. Nice to be here, and welcome also to everybody on Zoom. And also, I cannot really see it, but I think my Sanger from Vienna is here. Great. So yeah, I'm Shinko, and I will accompany you the next 3 months as shuso, as head monk. My main job will be cleaning the bathrooms, you maybe know, but I also will open the sendo, learn ceremonies and giving talks. So I will practice intensively and I will immerse myself in Sanshinji and weave myself into this network of the next 3 months. Let's see what comes out. What a great thing to be here. I have an idea about it, but you know how it is with your own ideas about anything. So we will see. Today is Buddha's birthday. What a great day to give a talk. And today is also Easter Sunday. Another great thing as former Christian to give a talk on this day. So maybe you know I come from Austria, a small country in the middle of Europe with a big history. In the 16th century, the Emperor of Austria said, "In my country, the sun never goes down." For example, Mexico was a part of the Austrian Empire. But with the First World War, this all ends, and now Austria is a small, still very beautiful country with around 9 million inhabitants. We have a lot of mountains, forests and snow, like Hoko has seen in this January. But not only. I live in the capital Vienna with a lot of historical buildings and a lot of art and music, especially classical music. And I'm very happy that there is a connection here with classical music too. In Bloomington, and Yale Weiss will tell us more during the Platinum celebration in June. My English, I think you will have a lot of fun with me. And my English, Hoko knows. I don't have this classical academic career. I'm a high school dropout. Later in second education way, I start to study architecture. But after a few years, I recognized that this is not my thing, and I started a business. And so my English education is not the best. And for this, I want to fill in a disclaimer here. I don't want to hurt anybody with my words. Inclusion is an important thing for me, and you will see this in my talks. But excuse myself right now at the beginning for my mistakes. Far too often, my ignorance has no boundaries, knows no boundaries. Knows no boundaries, and my ego is bigger than my practice. And if I also make mistakes in content, and that is certainly the case, then I ask you to give them right away too. So please be patient with me. I want to thank DeepL. This is a new translating software. And Suzanne now, Curio, she studied American studies and helped me the last years a lot to evolve my English, and especially with these talks. Today I start with introducing myself. In English it's a funny word, myself. I will talk about my past and how I came in this Sangha and what a challenge it was to come here and how complicated it is to leave the household for 3 months. There is my family. I'm grandfather since 9 months. My Sangha and friends, especially my work. I'm self-employed, and together with my wife, I have a small business as representatives for Scandinavian lifestyle brands, for home accessories, fine living and gifts. And right now, in these really difficult economic times, it is hard to leave all this behind. But my wife got ordained too as nun a few weeks ago, so she is understanding what I'm doing. She got ordained together with Suzanne, and She will help her and my daughter too, and the whole Sangha, so we will see what comes out. Another issue is, I and my wife, we stay together for 32 years. And with our common work, we are 24 hours together. And now I'm here 3 months alone, without all this. Leaving the household, what does this mean in 2023? I will talk later a bit more about this important matter. To create all these talks was a big challenge, not only because of the language, also because normally my scripts and ideas arise in a process very close to the scheduled talks, together with my books and notes. And I'm this old school guy. Most of my books I read in paper, and often I remember the passage where I read it. I remember the typeface, and most time my fingers find the position in the book while flipping through it. But I cannot take all my books with me to Bloomington, and not all are digitally available. And also digitally, the typeface is always changing. So I had to prepare everything before I came here. And this was a tough time. With all my various projects, you will hear about them later a bit more. My memory is functioning with pictures and how the things are related to each other. Antonio Damasio, a very famous neuroscientist, discovered in brains that have been cut into very thin slices that we actually store memories as images as well. He found pictures in our brains. I'm very interested how science explains how our consciousness arises or is created. I read a lot of books about it, but I'm not a scientist, and so I will and cannot really talk about it. But sometimes I will make a short trip there in my talks. Because sometimes I'll feel like a consciousness scientist too. As you maybe can imagine, not in a classical science way, but sitting upright in Zazen is exploring how our consciousness is working. Most of my talks are about this topic too. But how do I fill all these talks? How can I talk for so many hours about something we cannot talk about? I told a friend from my challenge, he is not practicing, and he said, no problem, I should do it with ChatGPT. And I have seen this was already tried here. But I decided to do not. But in one of my talks, I will explain my relation to artificial intelligence. And so with this preparation, the ango started very early for me. I want to talk the next weeks about how I found this place, how the Dharma brought me here on this place right now, how the Dharma brought me to the different teachers with all these different emphasis of the teachings. This may sound sometimes a bit strange or unusual, but I want to invite you to follow me and hear how my path has developed. And I think especially in our Sangha, nobody has this straight way. Anyway, I got ordained by Hoko in 2019, here in this center, this guy from Austria. And I hope that after all talks, you got a little glimpse into my universe of understanding the development of Dharma and how it presents itself for me. Now the program of my talks. I want to talk the next week about the 4 embracing actions as main topic, Bodhisattva Shishopo, the 4 embracing actions, and they are offering, loving words, beneficial action, and identity action. But it will hover over all my talks more like a cloud. I will not really talk about Shishopo the whole time, but in a way I will do. Since the beginning of my practice, the important question for me was, how do I integrate the practice into my everyday life, into my daily life with all the needs, my fears, my worries, my wishes, and so on. And what does it mean to try as Bodhisattva to be in this world in our everyday life? And most part of my talks will be in a way about this question, how to live the Bodhisattva vows in daily life, and how can we reach this? How does our being become into being? How are the ingredients for what we call our being mixed together? And how can we practice to recognize and transform them so that we realize the formula of Hojo-san, 1 = 0 equals infinity in our everyday life? I will talk a lot about my own practice and especially how much my pastoral work, mainly in prison, helps me. Kodo Sawaki said, separated from daily life, Buddhism is a dead thing. All aspects of your life must be the Buddha way. I want to recommend Hojo-san's translations of the Shishopo and his commentaries, and if you don't have it, please talk to me or Soa. After the talk, we can send it to you. And please listen to all the other talks given here the last 2 months about Shishopo. My talks will start today with an introduction of myself. The second talk will be an introduction to Shishopo. Then in my third talk, I will talk about transformation and how we get there. This includes the Zen repentance, breathing, inner alchemy or Naidan, and turning the light. Then I will talk in my fourth, fifth, and sixth talk about perception and how our consciousness arises and evolves. And this will include Yogacara, Tatus, Vijnana, Skandhas, emptiness, interconnectedness, and sure a few other things too. Then my seventh talk will be about engaged Buddhism and my chaplaincy work as prison chaplain. How can we bring the merit or the fruits of our practice to society? To give them a framework, we founded our association 1000 Hands. It is like the second side of our practice coin. I don't want to mix our Zen practice with our social work for the community. We have our Sangha on the one side and the community work with 1000 Hands on the other side, like the two truths. They are interdependent, but we don't mix it, because like Hojo-san quotes, they never meet. And for sure, in all talks, a lot of other things will be included. I will ask questions about the development of society and so on, and how our view out of our Zen practice can help. What does this mean to be in the midst of the marketplace, to look behind the scene, how the myriad things are working together, but in this way, like in Koan 25 of the Blue Cliff Records, the hermit says, "As for me, I put my staff over my shoulder, pay no attention to other people, and set off for the myriad of pigs." To understand this kind of thinking in connection with interconnectedness is an important practice. Dongshan Liangxi, the founder of the Xiaodong lineage, the precursor of the Soto Zen, says in the beginning of his enlightenment poem, "Now I'm alone." I want to explain my view on interconnectedness and how we can experience it more in our daily life. Because my life is more lay life, I'm more a priest than a monk. I most care for my family. I must care for my family. My younger daughter is studying psychology, and my older one made me a grandfather 9 months ago. In my profession, I'm a salesman, a businessman, and this is not normal in Buddhism, but maybe helpful, and Buddha likes salesmen, and Buddhism and economics is an important topic. I did a lot of things in my life. When I was in this age, getting a teenager, I get interested in chemistry, fascinated how these things can change. When I was around 10 to 12, a friend of mine got as Christmas present a chemistry set. And part of this chemistry set was an experiment that was really fascinating to us. We mixed potassium permanganate, a very important chemical. For example, in former times used for photo processing, it has a wonderful deep purple color. So we mixed it with hydrochloric acid, and then it gets totally clear. Loses the color and green steam evaporates. What a transformation. And this was my first contact with alchemy. Somebody told us about this old mystical chemistry and showed us old books with drawings from magicians in front of big kettles. I was so fascinated how somebody can make out of lead gold and to find the philosopher's stone. I also was fascinated from high explosives. I can tell a lot of crazy stories, but not here. However, I had to leave after lower secondary school because I had not the best behavior. I changed to secondary college for operational chemistry. There I learned that there is the atomic core and around are the orbits, the electrons. I still have this image in my mind, this clear drawing, the core and the electrons. But today physics knows that this is not really so clear and not so important. And since the 50s of the last century, it is getting clear that this empty space between electrons and atomic core is more important. To get closer to this space in between is very important in my practice. Brings up a lot of questions, and you will see this in my talks the next weeks. Form is emptiness and emptiness is form. We chant this every day in the Heart Sutra, but what does this mean and how we can experience it? There is this space in between, the negative space it's called in science, and in Japanese or in Japan it's called ma, literally meaning gap, space or pause. It's interpreted as the concept of negative space. The kanji for ma combines the characters for gate and sun and can be literally translated to sun gate. It evokes the image of light traveling through the cracks of a doorway. The image of light traveling through the cracks of a doorway. My first teacher in our lineage, Kaiku Robi, was often talking about cracking the wall. And then the light will shine through. And the meaning of light is an important matter in our practice. This concept of ma runs through the entire Japanese culture, especially design, architecture, and art. A long time in my life until now, exploring this space was and is part of my work, because my business area is in the design and interior field. And when I was young, I studied architecture and also worked a few years in architectural offices. This relation in space, the conditions, how things are arranged, have an effect on us, and most time we don't realize it. The concept of ma is also responsible for the fact that Japanese architects have become very famous and created buildings all over the world. And also in the Japanese flower arrangement art, ikebana, the concept is realized. My wife, now called Kukyo, practices this to my happiness. Our house and our altars are always adorned. How can we experience this space in between? And what is the connection from this to emptiness and then to interconnectedness? Again, like the formula Hucho-san always brings up, 1 = 0 = infinity. Two years ago, we had an event with our 1010 association. It is, like I told, the second side of our practice coin, to weave the merit or the fruits of our practice into society. And a part of what we want to do with our association is initiate public discussions in combination of spirituality and science. But with the pandemic, it was not so easy, but we had one event we called Interconnectedness and Microbiome. Together with a famous biology scientist from Austria, Professor Gabriele Berg, she is a star in microbiome science, she said, when we still sit without talking 1 hour together, then our microbiome exchange 1 million of informations, and it is like a language with grammar. And she can more and more read this. Great. Or right. So we will repeat this event in autumn. Next theme of this public discussion should be interconnectedness and quantum physics. Maybe you know last year's Nobel Prize winner in physics was an Austrian, Professor Sellinger. He discovered how teletransportation works in real, with 2 electrons. He already had a talk 10 years ago with the Dalai Lama. He is interested in this connectedness to spirituality too, so maybe we can invite him. These are attempts in physical science or in biology for an explanation of interconnectedness and of the space in between. And in a public context, science is important. Buddhism has here clear answers. Our concept out of Abhidharma and Yogacara gives us clear answers how consciousness arises and interconnectedness happens. Science still cannot give this answer. Normally, we feel connected through social concepts in society, like family, social activities with friends, neighbors, or in soccer clubs, or in our community, like volunteer in fire departments, and so on. With these activities, we feel connected. Our 5 skandhas are filled and we identify ourselves, and this identification with it gives us support. We feel grounded. We have an anchor. What happens when all this falls apart and our identification disappears? When all these feelings they are behind this identification get lost because you got disappointed or something else happened and so on. What happens afterwards? What is the ground we land on? The poet Antonio Machado said, mankind owns 4 things that are no good at sea: rudder, anchor, oars, and the fear of going down. What happens when the bucket loses the bottom? This old metaphor. What gives us stability? Losing this identification is my interpretation of leaving the house. The phrase associated with becoming a monk, shukotokoto. And losing identification is also part of shishubo in identity action, the 4th embracing action in shishubo. But what comes up when the bucket loses the bottom? It is fear in a pure way. And about fear, I will talk a lot of times too. Fearlessness is a part of the 1st embracing bodhisattva action giving. Most time I will talk about beneficial action, the 3rd of the 4th embracing actions, and about what is the background to achieve all these 4 embracing actions. The experience of interconnectedness is the most important background for all 4 actions. Interesting is that interconnectedness is not one of the 24 key items of Sotosho, but maybe because all of the key terms flow into interconnectedness. How our being is arising or how it is created and how is all interwoven to the manifestation we call our life. An important key phrase in my practice is out of the Genjo Koan. Study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To find out about the relationship, how is all connected, how all the ingredients of a moment, for example, this moment here, manifest to this what we call my life. Anyway, interconnectedness is the essential key term in my life, in all our lives. But most time we are not aware, and the question for me is how can we experience this interconnectedness and how can we get in connection every moment? Disang asked Feiyan, where are you going? Feiyan said, around on pilgrimage. Disang said, what is the purpose of pilgrimage? Feiyan said, I don't know. Disang said, not knowing is nearest. This is out of the case 20, out of the Book of Serenity, and this is my koan for this ango. And it is another key phrase in my practice, not knowing is nearest. Hongji, in Japanese Wanji Shogaku, the Chinese Zen master who collected the koan collection, the Book of Serenity, talks a lot about this space, this field of not knowing, this field of in-between, in his practice instruction, cultivating the empty field, the silent illumination. When somebody new is coming in our Sangha, first thing I tell him is, forget everything what you think you know about Zen monks or Zen priests. I'm in a way nothing of this, and I think nobody here is like this. When people start with practice, they are so full of ideas and don't expect something like me. I'm really a little bit different. For example, I have a big modern car because I have a job where I need this. I have to travel a few times a year, 2,250 miles a week. I'm a salesman, not a typical one because I sell beautiful things, modern living accessories from Scandinavia, but I'm a salesman. Normally, practitioners are psychotherapists, coaches or teachers, or work in a university and so on, but not businessmen. Businessmen are tough guys. They don't need this meditation thing. And if yet they use meditation then to clear the mind for better business. Maybe somebody has seen the series Billions. It's about a hedge fund manager and, as the title says, a billionaire. And he has his meditation room close by his office. And for important decisions, he goes there. I'm not this kind. But people maybe think this is true. I'm a salesman in a classical way. I cannot sell things I cannot touch. I need this feeling from all my senses. I need this feeling from a person in front of me, in a way to feel this space in between, this interconnectedness. So this field was important for me before I start to practice. And you will see I started to practice very late in my life. And it is not an option for me to leave the house. Means my whole life behind, let my whole life behind and forget about all of my responsibilities. The more I practice, the more I learn to take responsibility for my loved ones and for everyone around me. So the big thing to become a monk, to take the vows, leave the house and deepen my practice was always accompanied with doubts. These doubts about having a job, earning money, and so on. A few months ago, I wrote to my Dharma friend, Reverend Ho-chun. He is working for the Soto Zen International Center in Tokyo, and he is leading the international, also broadcasted Zen class every month. And I told him about all the projects I have in the moment, in my everyday life and in my practice. And he answered, "You are like a typical Japanese monk, busy all the time." So I was very happy about this answer. Since Dogen's time up to now, it is very usual for Japanese monks to go out to function as a temple priest ministering to the laity. For me means leaving the house, leaving my normal way of being in this world, my normal way of experiencing the world, particular to concentrate on this space between everything. In Shobogenzo, Virtue of Home Leaving, Nagarjuna is quoted. Leaving the household is similar to going out into an empty field where there are no people. They can keep their minds unified and free from thinking. As their thoughts inside retreat, their affairs outside also disappear. I'm 59 years old and I live with my wife in Vienna. We rent a house a little bit outside of Vienna, but still in Vienna. We have a lot of space because our children moved out. The older daughter lives 20 minutes from us, what is now with our grandson very helpful. And our younger daughter is studying around 600 miles away psychology in Germany. So we have a lot of space, and most time, Koryo Susan is living with us. Before the pandemic, we practiced in a rented room from the Austrian Buddhism Union in the midst of the city, but with COVID and the restrictions, we decided to move it in our house. We had enough space because our showroom was not needed for years anymore. Business has changed. And so we built there our sendo. So our sendo is in a normal house, like here. All is integrated in our normal way of living. 4 times a week, we open it for public practice, and every few weeks, we organize a practice day on Sunday. And 2 times a year, we do Gensui together, and also 2 times a year, we sit sesshin. 2 times a year, we need our sendo room for business. And so we move out everything to a smaller room. This is always a big event, to pack everything, the statues, the furnitures. We have done it before I came here. So everything is included, nothing is special. It is the whole life. But how comes this all together? How I came on my way? My wife's sister got married in a Zen monastery of the Sangha of Bekkaroshi in the Black Forest in Germany. I had no idea what Zen and Buddhism actually was until then. I only knew that my brother-in-law goes there several times a year and then sits in silence in front of a white wall for a week. I thought that was so incredible absurd that I didn't even give it a thought to find it silly or funny. About a year before this wedding, at the age of 24, I had to admit to myself that I had a big problem, that I was a heavy alcoholic. Thanks to my wife, who gave me a choice, either her or the alcohol, I had to manage to stay sober for more than a year by the time of this wedding. Of course, I also took advantage of professional help and went to rehab. Until I entered the outpatient rehab center, I didn't realize what a big social problem alcohol really is in our country. The dramas that took place behind the door of this institution in the lobby alone opened my eyes and showed the true extent of alcohol addiction in my country. After the first few months of freedom from addiction, the desire to give back and get involved arose, and through a friend I came to homeless help. We cooked food and used it to feed hungry people in several places in Vienna. This was my first experience of how happy it can make you to help other people, to give without getting anything obvious in return. The non-obvious was shown in the joy that united all of us when we went home late in the evening after distributing the food. We were elated and cheerful, despite feeling cold and tired from the hard work. During this time came the invitation to the wedding in the Black Forest. So I, who had no idea about Zen and Buddhism, opened the door in this monastery into a room where only people sat who had spent a week together in silence. From today's point of view, I'm quite sure that this opening of the door opened a gate in me, a gateway back into a sense of connectedness that I knew from my childhood days. I often accompanied my grandmother to church, and she prayed the rosary there every week with some other old women. There I experienced this feeling of connectedness, a deeply felt faith in the world and everything around me. However, this faith was then broken by the institution and the people working for the Catholic Church, and asleep until this door opened. I had been lost for decades. I tried instead to relieve my deep-seated sufferings with worldly ways, such as alcohol or other drugs, or through excessive consumption in general and of luxurious things in particular. But of course, these worldly methods only helped in the short term, and the old suffering always wanted to come back, demanding more and more distraction and covering, until nothing could no longer be sustained. All these impressions I took away from the monastery were very confusing. But after a few weeks, I asked my brother-in-law to show me how to meditate, and he gave me some instructions. Among them was a lying meditation, and after the first few minutes, I jumped up, and I was in a way really horrified at what I was observing in my mind. Yes, I had started psychotherapy in the meantime, but that was more about feeling better and questioning certain behaviors. But I had never observed my awareness like I did it in this meditation. It took me a few months to get into it again, and this time I started to sit down. In the meantime, my brother-in-law had told me about the local Sangha in Vienna, and it wasn't long before I was sitting with them regularly in the morning several times a week. Soon after, I went to my first session at the monastery in the Black Forest, and the second a few months later. So, These first years of practice were like sweeping my mind level by level, floor by floor. Memories, ideas, conceptions, everything that wanted to emerge I allowed. It was mainly my old wounds from my early childhood days that were hidden deep inside me. I tore down my walls and gave space for them inwardly in my zazen again and again. This brought so many tears that I cried in silence that I could have filled whole lakes with them. Because I gave space, many things disappeared and did not come back. During this time, my first encounter with Hojo-san was when I read Realizing Genjo Koan. And I heard about repentance for the first time in Zen context. Bhikkhu Roshi did not emphasize the concept of repentance. And these distinctions between absolute and relative repentance touched me deeply, opened something in me. The inherent possibility of transformation of all suffering connected with repentance in Zazen and my intensive practice of Naidan, I will talk in my third talk about, made it possible that my original dramas began to disappear more and more. In the meantime, my social engagement had also evolved, and I joined a small group and started going to prisons, taking care of inmates and meditating with them. But soon I realized that there was more than that. Going to prison for the first time was very exciting. My intention was to perceive everything with great intention, and my teacher advised me to stay with my breath. It was a special institution for mentally abnormal lawbreakers, a dramatic legal term that is still used in Austria. It is used for inmates with bad mental problems. It was a small institution in the center of Vienna, in a very normal residential area, in a very normal house. I was very surprised by this because I had actually once lived right around the corner and didn't know anything about this institution. I went in with a mentor, and after a simple security check, we were patted down. We had to lock up all items. Then we were taken by elevator to a large room by a very friendly security guard who had fun conversations with my mentor the whole times. It was a therapy room, empty except a few chairs. We placed this against the wall and laid out several thick, old and rather worn blankets that were provided for us. When the inmates were brought in, there were 5 of them, I was again very surprised because they were wearing normal street clothes and everyone looked well groomed and quite normal. After a brief introduction from me, we all sat down on the blankets in a circle and my mentor began a guided meditation. After about 20 minutes, he concluded it and we began a conversation. I was asked what I do, if I was married, had children. It was a normal conversational situation, as if we were meeting at a seminar or some other occasion. After another 20 minutes, a security came and declared our lesson over. We were escorted back to the door, and before I knew it, we were out of the door in the middle of the hustle and bustle of the city. I was so amazed at how easy it all went, and especially how normal everything was. The next few days, however, it was very strange during my morning zazen at home. I had to cry all the time. Also, there was no obvious reason for it. No old memories or images came up that could have moved me to do so. There was just an incredible, sad, indescribable feeling. This state lasted 4 days, and at some point I realized that it had to do with my visit in the prison. I took something away from our meditation session that manifested in my tears. Something I could not grasp that was working inside me and moving me. After a few days, this feeling left again, but it kept coming up after my prison visits and intensified over time, linking to my story in Zazen. Something began to work in me, to take effect, something that I observed without words, that I took out with me into my life. I was able to perceive how things are interconnected without having to use words. Of course, I have always functioned like this. We all function like this. For my whole life, but it was not clear to me until then how direct this connection was. Something in me drove me to want to know more about it, to get to the bottom of it, and so begin my career as a pastor. The chaplaincy work also offered me a great opportunity to establish my practice in everyday life. The practice I learned in the monastery were very difficult for me to implement in my daily life, in my work as a salesman traveling through Austria, but also as father and husband. But in this special situation, in this special field that I could enter through my social engagement, there was also the time to notice this space in between. I realized that we don't always have to make decisions right away, but that we can stay in the moment and go deeper. I will tell more about my chaplaincy work in my talks. It will always be part of them, and the chaplaincy work is my expression of the beneficial action. Out of my story, my personal vows arise, and the first is to support people who were not as lucky in their lives as I was, because my social environment saved me from my final crash. Another vow is that I want to bring spirituality, religion, or whatever we call it, back into society. And so my bad deeds will be maybe transformed and become the fertilizer for my practice. At the end of Oryoki, the Doan chants, like the lotus out of the muddy water. And in the Diamond Sutra, Taineng says, delusion is the root of enlightenment. If someone uses this for their practice, it can become the means for transcending the world. The lotus doesn't grow in high places. It only blooms in muddy waters. Delusion doesn't injure the enlightened mind. So too, smoke and clouds obscure the sun and moon without injuring them. If a jewel is dropped into mud, neither is the jewel injured. Don't concern yourself with the clouds of delusion. Concentrate on the enlightened mind. Thank you. So this is enough from my side today. If you have any questions, commentaries, and something else you want to share, please.
Is there anybody on Zoom that would like to make a comment or has a question?
Yes, I have something. You mentioned your former experience as an alcoholic, and I come from a family with many alcoholics, and it's something that I've struggled with a little bit, how to kind of approach as a Buddhist, because it feels so personal. It's difficult to sort of rise above that and kind of really do bodhisattva action, I think. So I'm curious, one, from your own experience, and two, maybe since then, if you've worked with alcoholics, I'd be curious to hear about that. But just sort of maybe some thoughts about how you can act as a bodhisattva in that sort of setting, without getting too specific, I guess, to my
this is this could be a long answer.
Maybe we can talk more later.
Yeah, sure we can talk, because this is a very very big topic. Like I told, in my country, I all my friends said afterwards I stopped to drink alcohol. You are not an alcoholic. Yes, you are a normal Austrian drink man. Yeah. So, and it is really a big problem. Yeah, and to serve it as bodhisattva is, it always depends on what are your talents. My talent is to come in connection, to communicate, and I served for many years now in a homeless shelter with a lot of alcohol addicted persons, mostly men, yeah, and to stay with them, to hear their whatever they talk. And to serve them, to help them, this is my way that I have done, yeah, and to be with them also in dying, yeah, in all their sicknesses, and they have a lot of sicknesses because alcohol is a very bad thing, yeah, and destroy over the time the whole body, yeah.
Thank you.
But maybe I have to say I can be very lucky again because one professor said me one time there are 4 categories of alcoholics, and I'm maybe the fourth one, who has a special enzyme, who was the ground that I can drink so much, you know. All my friends are lying under the table, and I said, "Oh, can we open a bottle?" Yeah. So, and now this enzyme helps me that I can drink again alcohol, and I do it since a few years now. Yeah, only on holy days, for example Easter. and I also got this feeling for my clear mind, and I don't want to lose this. Yeah. And when I drink alcohol now, I can feel it very fast, yeah, that my mind gets in a foggy thing, yeah. So, yeah. So, no problem to offer me alcohol. So, you also had a question. I forgot your...
Oh, my name's Nate.
Yeah, Nate, yeah.
No, I just wanted to make a comment, and just I really resonate and appreciate you sharing, you know, your vulnerability.
Yeah.
Your vulnerability, and I think that that's something for me that's I'm trying to be more open in that way. So I really hear so much in your story about how you're creating your spiritual life in this clear way, and then having a balance with your work life and your family life, and many moving parts and many things, and I can relate to that, you know, very much. And I'm also a recovered alcoholic, and I'm of that fourth type, and so I recovered through a 12-step program and through Zen.
Great.
And so it was just really nice for me to hear that. I think you're the first person in my life I've ever heard say, I was really excited to go to prison for the first time.
I have to say, I'm really excited when I come out every time.
Right. But I've also been, well, we won't go there. I've also worked with people who've been incarcerated as well, and it is a powerful experience.
Yeah.
It really is. And being in that environment and coming out of it's very powerful.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just wanted to express some gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not easy to talk about own vulnerability. Yeah, to talk about their wounds, their own old wounds. But you will hear a lot more about in my talks, and also to be with them, because I think it's very important to allow them to arise and to feel our own sadness about this. Yeah, we cannot transform something when it is not here. Yeah, when it is not manifested. We can only manifest when it is here, and then we can try to transform it. Or you will hear it in I think in my third talk about transformation and how helpful Zen, this sitting in silence is in combination with repentance. It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's not easy, as we know everybody, but it's very helpful. Open our hearts, this is what I have learned. Not be the straight business guy, always successful and with a There is a question.
Yeah.
Yes?
You spoke a little bit about sort of two sides of the coin in practice. And I think specifically you were talking about in the Zendo and then your 1,000 hands, which I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about in different talks. But one of the things you said that struck me is not mixing the two sides, which I think we sometimes hear from Dharma teachers, the emphasis is on there's no separation between Zendo and the world. But then in another way, I think the emphasis that I'm hearing from you is you can also say they don't meet.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that idea.
This is a very difficult question. Maybe we should ask Hojo-san. because this comes out of the last Gensui. Yeah, that it is really a kind of paradox. Yeah, but there is, on the one hand, like Tainan said this from out of the Diamond Route, my last quote. Yeah, that there is the enlightenment and there is the delusion, and they are they are together and not separated. Sure, absolutely, but to see this in two different ways, to differentiate it, yeah, to make distinctions. This is a very important point. To make distinctions does not mean to make discriminations, and to see this in two ways, yeah, that's maybe the thing. A lot of Zen Buddhism centers do social work out of their practice, and they mix it together with their practice, and this is for me I don't know this English. In German we say verwässern, rewatering this idea of practice. Maybe maybe you can help me.
Dilute.
Yeah.
Dilute,
Dilute, yeah. Yeah. And so this we want to avoid. Yeah. There is our practice of Sazen and still sitting in the one way, and there is out of the merit it evaporates, the steam or whatever, yeah, evaporates out of the practice into our daily life and our social work. Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Any other questions? Anybody online?
Shinko, this is Fusatsu. So glad to see you and Ango.
Hey, hi, Fusatsu.
Yeah, so excited, and again, really excited to hear your talks. And again, it's very similar to what Sawyer was saying. It was very good to hear your experiences of the immersion of your practice, but your separation, not the dilution of your practice, but actually what the manifestation of being a priest and what that means for you in your day-to-day life, like, and how you maintained and hold that. So it's going to be very interesting to hear about that manifesting through your practice and also what arises from you in day-to-day. So I really appreciate you being here and looking forward to meeting you in person, and also appreciating this time with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I will be happy when you are here.
Anybody else? Anybody anywhere?
What about Vienna?
What about Vienna?
Okay.
Shall we close?
Yeah, I think we close.